Countless dark viscous substances instantly spread out from those black pupils, attaching themselves to him in an instant, grotesquely surging into his soul. He immediately retreated in shock. In the distance, there came Lin's painful cries and laughter. It hurts so much. To be cursed is actually this painful. But I can endure. Lin covered his right eye, smiling as he leaped from the ground. Tentacles extended, pulling his body up onto the roof of the church. Mr. Undead, you always said I was cursed. I think you should deal with the curse in your own body first. Heta. Black Skull immediately rushed forward, this time without any reservation. He released numerous spiritual waves, intercepting the tentacles extending from Lin. But the next moment, his pupils suddenly contracted, because he immediately saw that all his attempts to intercept the tentacles had invariably deviated. His spiritual blades didn't hit a single target, and he immediately saw that the mental attack he launched against Lin had, for various reasons, failed to affect him. He was greatly shocked. Curse? Could it be? Was this the effect of the curse he had just applied to himself? And in the next moment, under Lin's maniacal smile, the tentacles that shot out touched the terrified villagers who were fleeing in all directions. Rather than piercing through as imagined, the tentacles only slightly touched them, then immediately changed direction. His goal wasn't slaughter at all. He was diagnosing. He was spreading ailments. Left shouted loudly, finally breaking free from Lin's tentacle bind. She sprang up from the ground, tentacles extending rapidly, entwining his body tightly. Snap out of it. Can't you see that something's not right with you anymore? Left, we're good friends, and you're bothering me like this. Left coiled around like a snake, gritting her teeth. I don't want to talk to the current you. If you still have your normal awareness, immediately remove the curse in your body. I know you have that ability, she yelled. In an instant, she surged towards Lin like a winding snake. If you don't want to remove it, today I'll wake you up. Lin, reaching into his pocket, said, really? Left, I know your weakness. Are you sure you want to attack me? Lin suddenly pulled out a bottle with a skull emblem from his pocket, opening the cap with a wooden sieve. Left, rushing towards him, was shocked. Could it be? Lin's face showed a sinister smile. Then he tilted his head back, raised the bottle, and poured it into his mouth. Pesticide? This guy actually carried pesticide to deal with her. Almost as Left was about to reach Lin, her long arms and palms softened, and the tentacles quickly retracted to their normal size. She spat out her tongue all at once, vomiting heavily. Lin caught Left's wrist, swaying it up and down vigorously until after spitting stars, he stuffed it into his pants pocket. Easily dealing with Left. With a slight tilt of his mouth, he leaped to the top of the church again. But at this moment, he suddenly saw black feathers falling under his feet, raised his head in astonishment. At an unknown time, in the thick black mist above, black crow feathers fluttered down, floating and fluttering. He saw a tall figure wearing black leather clothes and a bird beak mask. Mr. Crow, have you recovered? I'm really happy for you, Lin exclaimed. Crow lifted his head, indifferent. I already understand your situation. Do you need my treatment? Lin smiled faintly. I can cure my own illness. You don't need to bother. I have more important things to do. Sorry, I have to go. In an instant, he leaped. But as soon as he leaped a few meters, a feather left a blood mark on his cheek. Crow, cover his eyes. There's something strange about his right eye. Be careful, he might curse you. Black Skull's soul shouted from a distance. In an instant, Crow squinted. The black feathers instantly covered Lin's eyes and cheeks. Mr. Crow, do you want to treat me? Lin, blindfolded, bound all over, exposed his white teeth, smiling and asking. Crow stepped forward, expression indifferent, fingers quickly sketching out golden runes in the air. After I suppress the curse inside you, we can have a good chat. The arriving Black Skull shouted anxiously, Mr. Crow, don't relax your guard. This kid's abilities are too strange. If you're not careful, he'll seize the opportunity. Lin grinned, that's why. My mouth should have been sealed. Heta. In an instant, he suddenly opened his mouth, smiling towards Crow, sticking out his tongue. Crow, who was targeted, immediately felt a chilling sensation rising from his body, as if his ears were filled with countless wailing and howling of evil spirits. The next moment, his skull suddenly split from the middle, and countless thorny tentacles surged out of the crack in his skull. Crow, cover his eyes. There's something strange about his right eye. Be careful, he might curse you. Black Skull's face turned pale. That was a curse. It was a chaotic curse of the aggregation of evil spirits. Crow suddenly knelt on the ground, and the constructed runes in his hand pressed against his own skull, starting to suppress the curse in his body. He gritted his teeth, saying, we underestimated this kid. I didn't expect him to have so many strange abilities. Black Skull hurriedly rushed to his side, frowning. Do you know what kind of curse is inside his body? I always feel that it's not an ordinary disorder. Crow's gaze flickered. The executors have already told me. If the executors did indeed see the outline of a clown in his body, then the curse they saw inside him is indeed very similar to some curses he had encountered before. But this curse, even in the Night Doctor's records, is not well documented. The only record is on a case file from decades ago, describing a scene when a Night Doctor traveled to a city shrouded in mist. In the record, it described that the ancient and mysterious presence released in that dark world city led to chaos due to a city-wide curse. Thousands of creatures were cursed and driven insane, and among them was this kind of clown curse. Every person cursed would gradually become mentally confused over time, and under the influence of the curse, they would gradually become crazed and agitated, triggering the medium in their bodies under the curse, causing the curse within them to continue to spiral out of control. And if they couldn't break free from the curse's influence before it went completely out of control, the out-of-control negative emotions would slowly form a completely new and insane will within the host, and then completely take over that person. Black Skull turned his head, looking solemnly at the crow, and said hoarsely, "Chief, if it is indeed the curse you mentioned, how should we deal with it?" The crow said in a deep voice, "Firstly, you must understand that most curses can be counteracted by divine power. The curse within the young man's body has just shown signs of losing control, indicating that he hasn't been cursed for a long time. In that case, we can find a way to remove it." Black Skull hesitated. Divine power. You mean, in other places, it might be tricky, but not here. The crow raised his head, gazing far into the central church of the town with profound eyes. This town has a relic from the divine world. Inside the church, the mayor stood with a heavy gaze, leaning on his cane, and behind him were hundreds of anxious residents of the small town. Most of the residents had taken advantage of the previous gap and moved to the church. Those who had been infected by the young man and contracted a terrible disease had already been properly accommodated. "Mayor, what's going on? Why did Dr. Lin suddenly become like that?" And everyone touched by Dr. Lin has various abnormal symptoms. The surrounding townspeople were pale and uneasy, because they found that the diseases Dr. Lin imposed on them were very similar to the types of diseases on the subdued werewolves before. But they couldn't understand. Clearly, he was friendly just a while ago. The mayor raised his head solemnly, saying, "This is the dark world. Nothing is impossible here." Maybe he was influenced by something. Perhaps he was originally an evil spirit spreading diseases. Regardless of the situation, all we can do is try to preserve ourselves. In the spacious hall, candlelight flickered. And at this moment, suddenly, above the church's main door, two figures with bird beak masks appeared abruptly. They were like ghosts, directly ignoring the obstruction of the door and stepping into the church. "Be on guard." A loud shout. Click, click, click. Several shotguns were instantly aimed at the two night doctors who appeared suddenly. "Don't be nervous, we're not here to harm you." The crow extended his hand, and a hoarse voice came from under the bird beak mask. The frightened residents in the hall were all on edge, with pale faces, looking at them with extreme vigilance. The mayor, holding his cane, reached out to stop the guards around him and said warily, "What business do you two have here?" The crow's mirrored lenses reflected the faint candlelight inside the church. He said hoarsely, "You must have seen the condition of your doctor. We found a curse inside him, and that curse has affected his cognition, causing severe abnormal behavior. He is still lurking in your town, and because of the curse's influence, he will undoubtedly seek to diagnose more creatures, thus increasing the spread of the disease. And you are the best targets for him in this town." With these words, the townspeople were all shaken, and their faces turned pale. The mayor's gaze tightened, and he said solemnly, "Do you want us to be his bait?" The crow hoarsely said, "No, we are here to seek help." After hearing the crow's explanation, the faces of all the townspeople present turned pale. The mayor furrowed his brows and said, "So, you want to borrow our sacred relic to help Dr. Lin?" The crow hoarsely replied, "Any sacred object containing divine power is an antidote to curses. We are night physicians, we cannot ignore anyone cursed. Therefore, we need your help." The mayor looked troubled because the sacred relic was almost their only hope in this world. If anything went wrong, all their efforts over the centuries would be in vain. Seeing his hesitation, the crow continued to persuade, squinting and saying, "I understand that you may have some misunderstandings about us night physicians. However, you must also understand that we have no aversion to the divine world. In a sense, our leader used to be an ally of your sacred world." This statement shocked the mayor. He stared at the night physician in front of him, unable to speak for a moment. His face turned pale, and he asked, "Who is your leader?" The crow squinted and said nothing. Slowly, he reached into his robe and took out a metal pendant. On the pendant was engraved a 12-winged, upside-down angel bound by numerous chains. In an instant, silence enveloped the surroundings. The mayor stared in shock at the pendant depicting the bound angel, murmuring almost instinctively as he took a step back. A 12-winged archangel. Could it be? He muttered, recalling the ancient paintings in the sacred world about the last generation. Angels falling into hell, the sky burning like blood, countless eyes overlooking all living beings, and chains dragging the gods into the eternal night of purgatory. In that ancient legend, the 12-winged archangel was one of the 12 ancient gods they once worshipped. He shivered suddenly, his gaze falling on the lenses of the crow's mask, staring directly into his eyes. Could it be? Could that legendary being still fetch the sacred relic immediately? Almost at that moment, the candles in the entire church flickered violently, and in the next moment, a cracking sound came from the glass on the top of the church, and a shadow suddenly reflected in their vision. The faces of the surrounding townspeople turned pale. "He's here," the crow shouted loudly. The mayor raised his head solemnly and asked, "Do you need our help?" The crow said gravely, "No need. You go prepare for the awakening ritual of your sacred relic." He turned abruptly, looking at Black Skull, and said, "Black Skull, the curse inside you significantly affects your combat abilities. Stay here and protect the residents. I'll handle that, young man." Black Skull hoarsely replied, "All right. Be careful." The crow nodded with narrowed eyes. In an instant, the cawing of countless crows echoed. His body instantly transformed into a swarm of pitch-black crows, flapping their wings, rushing towards the direction where the glass had shattered. "Your game ends here." The indifferent voice of the crow echoed around. "This time, I won't hold back. I will completely remove you from his body before you replace this young man," he shouted. In an instant, the countless crows that were circling launched an attack towards Lin. "Mr. Crow, have you already suppressed the curse I gave you?" "You're truly a powerful doctor, but you're wrong. Your target shouldn't be me. All these people here are sick. As doctors, shouldn't we heal those who need our help first? They are suffering, and yet you're chasing me. You've really disappointed me." Lin sneered, pressed against the wall, took out a bubbling potion from his pocket, and threw it towards the flock of crows. Boom! The potion exploded, releasing numerous greenish mist, enveloping the entire crow flock. He smirked. "Mr. Crow, I apologize. I can't let you stop me. They must receive help, and I really can't endure it any longer." In an instant, he laughed wildly and pulled out a pitch-black and hideous arm from the system space. A huge dragon head attached to the end of the arm looked ferocious. The eyes of the giant black dragon's head lit up with furious light, as if molten magma was flowing within. "Enjoy the flames." "Head, are you awake?" Lin was startled, but almost in an instant, his expression once again became distorted and chaotic. Then he hastily took off the dragon's breath arm, throwing it into the system space. "A small mistake. Sorry, I have to go." Mr. Crow, taking advantage of the distraction caused by the scattered crow flock just now, they suddenly surrounded him from all directions, enveloping him. "It seems your will hasn't completely gone astray, meaning you still have a chance to recover." "Suppress." He squinted. In an instant, the magical circle centered on Lin expanded hundreds of meters. Invisible chains shot towards Lin in the midst of the crow flock. Whoosh! Lin's limbs were instantly bound by those chains. "I'm really fed up with you, you crow." Lin's expression was grim. Under the immense pressure, a tentacle suddenly grew from his chest, winding abruptly around his neck. The end of the tentacle suddenly opened a pitch-black vertical pupil. A pitch-black focusing pupil. Left was shocked and exclaimed, "Be careful." But it was too late. Almost at that moment, under the gaze of the focusing pupil surrounding him, the crow flock that surrounded him fell in large chunks, starting to dissolve. Mr. Crow immediately felt a chill rising in his heart, his expression greatly shocked. He suddenly took out the inverted 12-winged angel from his chest, pressing it on Lin's forehead with his thumb. "Holy Son, Holy Father, Holy Spirit," he chanted quickly, fingers pointing over Lin's forehead and shoulders. "Amen." The pendant of the inverted 12-winged angel in his hand suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light. On Lin's grim face, numerous black capillaries suddenly climbed, and the human figure in his body seemed to flicker like the ghostly image of an old TV. A strange and extremely eerie scream suddenly came from Lin's mouth. The black mist spread out from his body. "Annoying, annoying, annoying." Lin grimly clenched his teeth, and dozens of tentacles suddenly erupted from his body, entwining Mr. Crow heavily. "Ding, you have discovered the target disease, skin ulceration." "Ding, you have discovered the target disease, bone necrosis." "Ding, you have discovered the target disease, muscle atrophy." Terrifying symptoms once again swept through Mr. Crow's body, making his eyes suddenly blurry. and taking advantage of this opportunity, Lin's tentacles suddenly lifted him off. In an instant, his tentacles took out one bottle after another from the system space, like blood-like potions. And at the sight of those potions, Left was horrified. No good. But it was already too late. Lin's tentacles instantly wrapped around those potions, crushing them with a snap. The crimson liquid instantly covered his body. Flesh and blood growth potion. It was Lin's biggest trump card. The last large-scale use had created Left, and it had already put his body in a state extremely prone to mutation. And using it again, the probability of a high-level mutation was definitely 100. This was also the reason Left knew she had to control him, because if Head truly went crazy, or forced him to the brink, he would definitely not hesitate to use the flesh and blood growth potion on himself. His skin began to swell, cysts appearing one by one. His body started to expand, arms and legs suddenly rioting out of his body. Mysterious and eerie screams one after another echoed from his flesh. It was a sign of complete loss of control over his flesh. Seeing this scene, Mr. Crow's face turned pale. He turned around urgently, shouting towards the direction of the church. Holy relic! At the same time, on a distant peak far from Silent Town, a butcher with a pig's head carrying a blood-red cleaver watched the towering light curtain. On his shoulder, there sat a black and white clown, rocking a music box only as large as 2 palms. Ding ding dong, ding ding dong. The music box emitted a continuously pleasant melody. Ha. The black and white clown froze with a smile on his face, and his body produced strange, puppet-like creaking sounds. Pig-headed monster, you wicked fellow. So, this is the purpose you requested that curse for. Ha. You're probably going to ruin that little devil, aren't you? Ha. The pig-headed butcher replied indifferently. He is too restrained. I thought that by throwing the kid from the blue star in front of him, invoking his sense of homeland, it could further accelerate his recovery. However, it seems the effect wasn't significant. The black and white clown smiled mysteriously, saying, "So, you used my curse." The pig-headed butcher said flatly, "That's the only purpose I let you out for." The black and white clown rocked the music box and laughed. "But aren't you afraid that he'll be completely done in by my curse?" You should be aware, since the moment the curse is activated, chaos has already begun. When he starts becoming crazy and paranoid, things will get out of control. The pig-headed butcher said indifferently, "Do you really think he hasn't taken precautions against this?" The black and white clown tilted his head, revealing the springs inside his neck. The pig-headed butcher continued, "This place is called the Curse Realm, which inherently has the power to enhance your curse. I have deliberately strengthened the influence here. Otherwise, when he bestowed diseases upon those werewolves, he would have already determined the effects of your curse. With his personality, he would not hesitate to suppress the curse and ensure it never has a chance to erupt." The black and white clown emitted eerie laughter, and the hand rocking the music box increased its frequency. So what? The curse is out of control now. How is he going to counter it? You should be well aware, although the divine power can suppress my curse, at the same time, it will make my curse even more uncontrollable. Don't tell me you want them to rely on those night healers. The pig-headed butcher lifted his head and said, "It depends on him, whether he can accept the distortion of self, at least up to now. Because so far, the curse has only magnified the impact on him in a few aspects. It made him more extreme, more self-righteous, more paranoid, and more prone to violence. However, these things did not truly touch his bottom line." The black and white clown smiled and said, "What is his bottom line?" The pig-headed butcher closed his eyes and said, "Prying open doors." The black and white clown maintained the smile, and the hand rocking the music box suddenly stopped. The pig-headed butcher, carrying his cleaver, raised his head and said, "Also, human lives. Silent Town. Town Square." The outbreak of the flesh-burgeoning elixir caused Lin's body to wildly inflate and distort. Countless chunks of flesh and screeching limbs continuously grew in the spreading mass of flesh. The screams made all creatures in the entire town painfully cover their ears. Quick! He turned around and shouted towards the direction of the church. Finally, the doors of the church opened with a resounding noise. Amidst the crowd, the damaged Holy Grail emitting boundless light was thoroughly awakened. The mayor was shocked by the almost mountain-like mass of flesh before his eyes. What is this? He quickly rushed to the front, grabbed the sacred relic, and rapidly casted spell after spell with both hands. In the midst of a raging storm, gritting his teeth, he forcefully levitated the sacred relic in front of him. His gaze was fixed on the swelling mass of flesh as he chanted exorcism prayers. Regnatari, cantate Deo, salai dominaque fortisupercalum caliad orientem exit abit vossa sui vos virtudes. Behind him, the mayor and the priests all closed their eyes, For a moment, the Holy Grail emitted boundless light. The black fog over the entire town was instantly dispelled. "You annoying pests!" An angry and insane voice echoed from within the massive flesh. Countless tentacles exploded from the massive flesh, wildly shooting in their direction. But it had no effect. Under the immense holy light, the terrifying purification effect instantly turned the tentacles into countless points of light as they approached the Holy Grail. Holy Son, Holy Father, Holy Spirit. Everyone closed their eyes, continuously chanting prayers. Step by step, they approached. The halo of the sacred relic became more and more intense. The chaotic mass of flesh began to be purified bit by the divine light, slowly shrinking and evaporating. Finally, after several minutes of continuous prayer, the massive flesh had shrunk enough to reveal the struggling human figure within. In the center of the magic circle, Lin's head suddenly struggled out of the mass of flesh, sharply clutching his head, his face full of ferocity and madness. The curse inside him had indeed undergone significant purification and suppression. But for some reason, there was no sign of it being completely dispelled. Instead, it seemed to be boiling more violently the more it was purified. There must be something wrong. Do you really think you can dispel me? You'll only make me suffer. You'll only make me lose control. You annoying clown. He let out a sharp scream. In an instant, accompanied by crackling electrical currents, he suddenly lifted his hand from the broken flesh. A silver revolver instantly aimed in his direction. Bang! A gunshot rang out. At that moment, everyone present showed expressions of shock, trembling as they looked at the bullet that shot out from the barrel. Ignoring the constraints of the magic array, ignoring the suppression of the Holy Grail, grazing past the radiance of the Holy Grail, his pupils suddenly dilated. Crimson blood splattered from his chest, staining the Holy Grail suspended in front of him. The Holy Grail fell heavily to the ground. The surging holy light extinguished in that instant. Without the blessing of the holy light, the pendant of the 12-winged archangel finally exploded with a loud bang. Bang, bang, gunshots. Lin advanced madly step by step. Noisy, noisy. He kept firing, and bullets burst into blood flowers on his chest. Everything seemed silent at that moment, but it seemed that no one could restrain his furious anger. Crimson tendrils suddenly burst out. "I want you dead." "Head," Lefty almost screamed, her voice on the verge of breaking. Because she knew, if he really killed someone, then he would lose all chances of redemption and completely deviate from the principles he adhered to. Because the young man from the blood-saw shop would never indiscriminately kill the innocent. Click. But at that moment, Lin still pulled the trigger. Bang! A gunshot. On the distant mountain peak, the black and white clown sitting on the shoulders of the pig-headed butcher revealed a cruel smile, saying, "Aw, pighead, you failed." This shot not only took the life of the night doctor but also crossed his bottom line. He finally couldn't resist my curse. Haha. Saying that, he jumped down from the pig-headed butcher's shoulder, poked his red nose, and walked down the mountain with a sly smile. But before he could take 2 steps, the indifferent voice of the pig-headed butcher came from behind. "Aren't you going to continue watching?" The black and white clown chuckled and turned his head. "Is there anything else interesting?" Witnessing the birth of a new clown, the pig-headed butcher said indifferently, "Perhaps it's not as you expected." The gaze of the black and white clown suddenly condensed. In the next moment, he turned around abruptly, looking in that direction. Silent town. The entire square fell into a deathly silence. On the ground by his ears, a bullet was embedded there. He could even smell the smoke from the barrel, and he was prepared for death. But it didn't happen. The bullet didn't hit his forehead but landed by his ears. Lefty shivered, looking at this scene. A horrifying clown face suddenly appeared on his cheek, and he forcefully controlled the hand holding the gun. But this time, no matter how hard he tried, the finger on the trigger couldn't be pulled. "How could you? How could you?" The face of the clown on his cheek trembled madly, a great unease sweeping through his heart. And it was in the next moment, he trembled to see. The hand holding the revolver lifted slowly, then, under his trembling gaze, pressed against his own chest. In an instant, the whole sky became so quiet. "You had enough," a voice sounded. Exactly in that moment, the finger pulled the trigger. Bang! The gunshot. The bullet penetrated from his back, and a dark silhouette suddenly flashed in that shot, almost instantly revealing its appearance. Bang! The second shot. Bang! The third shot. With each pull of the trigger, a dark, whistling clown shadow could be seen being stripped away. And it was in the moment the fourth shot rang out. The screeching black shadow, in the continuous flickering, was almost reduced to only the black veins still connected to his body. And it was in that moment, Lin calmly reached out, a broken spear instantly appearing in his hand. He turned abruptly. At the moment when the shadow was about to return to his body, the spear pierced its chest, pinning it to the ground. You are the reflection magnified from my heart. You should understand, right? Lin slowly opened his calm eyes. In his hand, the revolver was slowly aimed at its forehead, and the rolling spiritual power slowly condensed a bullet in the revolver. The aura of curse elimination radiated a halo, gathering on his revolver. I, Lin, no matter how cruel, absolutely won't indiscriminately kill the innocent. I won't spare every person I find bad, but I won't slaughter everyone who is good to me. You can't replace me. Bang! Lin calmly pulled the trigger. Rolling black smoke emanated from the muzzle. The bullet hit the clown's forehead precisely. A strong wind swept through. The entire square fell into silence. The black shadow of the clown stared at Lin blankly, and the pitch-black outline slowly dissipated in the dazzling glow. Cursed item. Greatly increases agility and dexterity. You can never see the face behind the clown mask, whether it's smiling or crying. You can also never see the heart behind the mask, whether it's kind or evil. But when you put on the mask, you become the smiling clown on the stage. Lin calmly retracted the gun. Thank you. You truly deserve the title of Night Doctor. You actually broke free from that curse yourself. Lin stood calmly there, the wild wind blowing across the desolate ground. This curse came so unexpectedly, and when he truly realized the impact of the weeping clown, the curse had rapidly affected his cognition. I've caused a lot of trouble for you and everyone. I will do my best to make amends for my mistakes. Please believe in me. I shot you so many times just now, causing you to bleed so much. I feel guilty. I don't want to see you now. Go as far away as you can, understand? Lin rubbed his eyes, shook his head, and said hesitantly, but I really feel guilty. If I just walk away like this, I think I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life. Plop. Lin lay there, his face full of fatigue and emptiness, and then his vision gradually blurred. Hey, Lin. In a daze, it seemed to hear the urgent sound of the wind in his ears. As if, in a dream, in the darkness, as if a bright light was scanning the blurry vision. Faintly, faces with bird beak masks seemed to be visible, exceptionally hallucinatory. Surgical knife, pliers, hemostatic potion. One after another, very familiar terms kept coming into his ears, and his consciousness quickly plunged into darkness. Over the next few days, monitoring Lin was officially put on the agenda. Lin Observation Report. Day 1. 5 a.m. Observation Record. The target gets out of bed, suspected sleepwalking, goes to a corner of the house, performs some mysterious actions in the bushes for 2 minutes. Afterward, due to unknown reasons, severe physical conflict erupts with his mutated left hand, but ultimately reconciles. 7 a.m. Requests a delicate non-human flesh meat dish and a cup of any milk, approved after organizational research. 10 a.m. Observation Record. Target escaped through the chimney earlier and disguised a dummy on the bed to deceive the observer. Observer has been disciplined. Target was located in an abandoned house in the town at 9:52 a.m. and urgently contained. Appendix. During that time, the target was performing surgical treatment on a neglected werewolf. The werewolf exhibited intense fear and pain reactions after the surgery crossed out, but post-surgery, the werewolf responded well, fully recovered from various diseases, and insisted on eating a lamb, which was denied. 11:24 a.m. Observation Record. Target is in a relaxed state, in good spirits, communicates with a human lowly through the window. 1:13 p.m. Observation Record. Target shows excessive anxiety and guilt, renews request to join healing actions for town residents. Preliminary approval after organizational discussion, but requires accompaniment by 3 night doctors. 2:10 p.m. Admits to having 7 brothers, 9 sisters, 4 younger sisters, 5 uncles, 3 godmothers, 2 aunts, 1 riding mount, totaling 31 relatives. 7 p.m. Observation Record. Target apologizes to Chief Crow, engages in a 40-minute drowsy conversation. At exactly 7 p.m., Chief Crow requests a temporary halt to the record and a private conversation. Granted permission. Chief Crow, surprisingly, regains his physical form and warmly escorts the target back to his room. Chief Crow's attitude toward the target has changed from distant to friendly for unknown reasons. 9 p.m. Observation Record. Target in a pleasant mood requests an adult book, denied after organizational discussion. Note, similar proposals will not be considered. 9:46 p.m. Observation Record. Target in a good mood expresses warm greetings to the observer, requests permission for casual chat, granted since harmless. 5:59 a.m. Observation Record. Warning. Starting today, observers in contact with the target will be strictly limited to males. Observer number 1 was monitored in the target's cabin for a whole night, during which strange sounds and laughter were heard. When the shift changed in the morning, observer number 1 was reported to have an obvious red face and a shy gaze. P.S. This incident will be reported to Mr. Crow after organizing the information. 8:32 a.m. Observation record. Multiple undead night doctors hurriedly went to the location of the target, seemingly following Chief Skull's orders. Strong white light appears again inside the target's house. 9:12 a.m. Observation record. Continuous crying is heard from inside the target's house, shocking and unimaginable. All undead night doctors have unexpectedly regained their physical forms, as if it were a miracle. 8:32 p.m. Observation record. The target proposes to organize a bonfire party to express gratitude to the townspeople and night doctors for their care during this time. 7:21 a.m. Observation record. Deputy leader angrily arrives at the target's confined cabin. 7:26 a.m. Observation record. Stern reprimands and questioning voices are heard from inside the cabin. 7:41 a.m. Observation record. Once again, there is a white light inside the cabin. A loli in a beautiful pink dress walks out of the house with a flushed face. Before leaving, she bids farewell to the target shyly. Through her forced features and the night doctor attire she's holding, it can be preliminarily concluded she seems to be the deputy leader who entered earlier. 12 p.m. Observation record. I don't know if I should record this. 5 p.m. Observation record. The night doctor group proposes whether to suspend the observation and scrutiny of the target. 8:43 p.m. Observation record. Oh, Mr. Crow. Mr. Crow, come back soon. The target has successfully infiltrated our organization's internal affairs. In front of them, a night doctor wearing a beak mask held a form, scanning all 10 of them, and said indifferently, "Are all present? Next, I will call your names, and when called, respond." "Yes," everyone shouted in unison. "Copper Man, here," a mechanical synthesized voice responded. "Skeleton, here," a hoarse voice from an undead. "Blood Source, here," a playful voice of a vampire. "Good Doctor, Peace Ambassador, here," Lin shouted confidently. Instantly, all 9 members directed their curious eyes at Lin. Even the night doctor in charge of the assessment looked over. An indescribable awkwardness filled the air. The night doctor snapped his fingers again, and a door behind them slowly opened. Looking at his watch, the night doctor said calmly, "You have 2 minutes to choose your tools in that room. Don't worry, none of them are normal. Now it depends on your surgical skills. Time starts now. Go." "Yes," everyone shouted. Without a second thought, the 10 dark creatures immediately turned and quickly rushed into the open door. Soon, 2 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. The 10 apprentice night doctors successively found their suitable tools and walked out. The night doctor glanced at the mechanical puppet labeled number 1. Not bad. Besides a surgical knife, this was the best surgical tool. Then he looked at the tools of the undead labeled number 2. He nodded, relatively satisfied. Next, he set his eyes on the vampire number 3. Small, but if used well, it could be a good surgical tool. Then, he turned to the 4th, the good doctor number 4. "Where is your tool?" The night doctor hesitated. Lin replied seriously, "Here." Ching, ching. Lin picked up the rusty electric saw placed behind him, pulling it out with a sparking sound, emitting thick smoke from the old electric saw. Night Doctor Chief Examiner trembled as he looked at the rusty saw Lin held in his hand, clearly capable of causing tetanus at level 10. He said, "Where did you get this thing?" Lin earnestly replied, "I found it in the corner of that room, tried it out, and it worked, so I brought it out." The Night Doctor Chief Examiner was astonished. "Are you sure you want to use this thing for surgery on your predecessors?" Behind them, the patient lying on the 4th bed turned pale, beads of cold sweat dripping down. Reporting, Instructor. A true night doctor must be able to proficiently use any tool available in any environment to save lives and provide assistance. Please rest assured, Instructor, using a saw for surgery is one of my professional skills. I will surely excel in the operation on the Instructor. Lin stood tall and shouted confidently, displaying great spirit and determination. The saw in his hand emitted pungent smoke. He appeared to be an excellent and passionate young man no matter how you looked at it. The Night Doctor Chief Examiner took a deep breath and said, "You are very confident and courageous in challenging yourself, which is commendable. However, there's something I must tell you. Our surgery this time is not an open chest surgery or an amputation. It's just a minimally invasive procedure. And the patient you're responsible for merely has some spores with a diameter of less than half a centimeter on the prostate. Are you sure you want to perform surgery on him with this giant tool?" The Night Doctor Chief Examiner scolded sternly. The patient on the 4th bed gulped and looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. Obviously, he did not want to undergo surgery with such a tool. Lin thought for a moment, raised his head proudly, and said loudly, reporting, "Instructor, you mentioned that a true night doctor must be proficient in using any tool to save lives and provide assistance. In certain extreme situations, we may not have many tools to choose from. Therefore, I believe that using a saw for minimally invasive surgery is also a skill that night doctors must master. We absolutely cannot abandon our patients just because we lack suitable tools. That is a very irresponsible attitude. When necessary, not only a saw, but even a meat grinder should be used. Seize opportunities even if you have to create them. I've said my piece, sir." As soon as these words were spoken, the night doctor chief examiner was shocked. What he said was so invigorating. Using a meat grinder, seizing opportunities even if you have to create them. Isn't that exactly the virtue night doctors should possess, right? In extreme situations, where is the room for being picky? He turned abruptly, looked at the remaining 9 students, and shouted sternly, "Did you hear that? What does it mean to be professional? This is what it means. Look at what each of you is holding. Blades, fruit knives, bone fragments, diversify your thinking." The chief examiner knocked his temples rapidly, angrily pointed his finger, and said, "Go back and get new tools. Follow the example of student number 4. Do you understand? Act now." "Yes," the crowd roared. Seeing this scene, the other patients who were initially reveling in the misfortune of the 4th patient became terrified. 2 minutes later, the other 9 students also came out solemnly. The chief examiner looked at the tools in their hands and showed a satisfied expression, nodding repeatedly. Various mechanical sounds echoed continuously inside the trial hall. Thick smoke billowed. All the patients were holding rusted cutting machines, damaged electric drills, angle grinders. Even more outrageous was someone holding a hand-cranked metal fan. They really all followed the example of student number 4. The chief examiner looked at his watch and said loudly, "Good. You have half an hour to perform surgery on the patients. Within half an hour, you must complete the operation. If anyone exceeds half an hour, they will be eliminated. If you understand, start." With the chief examiner's command, the 10 students gritted their teeth, holding their smoking tools like fearless warriors, charging toward their patients. All the patients kept moving backward with pale faces. Although they were night doctors too, it was inevitable for them to feel frightened in such a situation, because these 10 individuals were not doctors who had received professional training like them. If they made a mistake, it would be difficult to handle. In front of the 4th bed, the 4th patient, trembling, looked at Lin, who had stopped in front of him. He grabbed the bed sheet tightly and said, "Young man, how about we make a deal? You put down the saw, pretend to be professional, and I'll perform the surgery on my prostate myself. Then I'll give you a perfect score. What do you think?" Lin looked calmly and seriously at the 4th patient, saying calmly, "Senior, you don't need to worry. I'm different from them. I'm a highly professional expert in using the saw. Patients who have survived in my hands have given me very high praise and recognition. So far, my positive feedback rate remains at 100%. I quit. The 4th patient struggled, got up, and turned to climb out of the bed. "I don't want this money. Whoever wants it can take it. I am." But before he could take a few steps, Lin injected a dose of anesthesia directly into his buttocks, pressing down on the struggling 4th patient's neck. Calmly waiting for the anesthesia to spread, Lin swiftly carried him back to the bed. Then, skillfully and quickly tearing off the bedsheet, he securely tied the patient's limbs to the 4 corners of the bed. The 4th patient muttered as he felt the effects of the anesthesia, saying, "I don't want to." Lin calmly tied him up, pulled open his clothes, put on gloves, moved aside his soft and limp part. "Don't worry, I'm a professional. For me, dealing with gastroenterology and prostate is a piece of cake. And as you've seen, they don't even give anesthesia to their patients, which is simply an irresponsible approach. Although I know night doctors don't have the habit of using anesthesia, frankly, I didn't either. But later I found out that anesthesia is indeed a good thing because it prevents the patient from moving. That's the best use of anesthesia." Poof. The sound of a chainsaw cutting into flesh. Wait a moment. He should have given me anesthesia, right? It should be. It can't be wrong. But why does it hurt so much when I insert it? It hurts like a damn mother. He opened his mouth and tried hard to scream, but due to the spread of anesthesia, his tongue gradually became paralyzed and he was unable to make a sound. He lowered his head tremblingly and watched Lin working on him with a rumbling electric saw. He could even clearly see his penis trembling under the loud rumble of the chainsaw. The blade precisely cut through the spores on patient number 4's prostate, perfectly detaching the spore from the body. The attention of the 9 students performing surgery on other patients was immediately drawn to him. They stared in shock at Lin, who was dancing with the electric saw. So fast, incredibly fast. Even every time they saw the sharp saw about to break through the bladder of patient number 4, about to cut off the patient's thing, the blade passed by with millimeter precision. They were stunned. For a moment, their attention was completely captivated by the dazzling saw technique. In just under 2 minutes, under the precise electric saw, the spores on the prostate were perfectly removed, and the saw, in Lin's hands, spun several times before plunging into the ground. White smoke emerged from the prostate of patient number 4, as if a beautifully presented dish had perfectly completed its final touch. The gentle flick, elastically smooth. Your popularity in the Night Doctor camp +1. Ding! Congratulations! You triggered a special achievement, Electric Saw Expert. You gained 200 basic experience. Electric Saw Expert, a special title achievement, obtained with a probability after successfully performing a high-difficulty surgery with an electric saw. This indicates that you have gradually mastered the professional technique of the electric saw. You gain a permanent bonus, Electric Saw Proficiency +1, Pretentious Success Rate +1, Patient Fear Value +1. The examiner walked over with satisfaction, diagnosed the 4th patient lying on the bed, and then turned to Lin with undisguised admiration. Not bad, not bad. To use an electric saw for such a minimally invasive surgery so quickly, it's beyond my expectations. I see potential in you, child. Lin solemnly shook hands with the examiner and said, healing the sick and saving lives is the duty of a doctor. As a white-robed angel, it is our obligation. He turned to the 4th patient and smiled. Number 4, give this young man who operated on you a score. I believe witnessing such a perfect and pleasing surgery must be extremely gratifying for you, right? But the 4th patient in state couldn't speak. At this moment, in his mind, echoes of the opening and closing of the electric saw, and every scene of narrowly avoiding contact with his 20. Each time was precise to the millimeter. Each time made you think it had touched, but it hadn't. Like jumping back and forth on the edge of life and death. He felt he had transcended. If there's a word to describe this feeling, it would be health +50, mental damage +99. Number 4, can you hear me? The examiner leaned in doubtfully, listening carefully, but didn't hear any sound. Maybe the anesthesia hasn't worn off yet. The examiner waved his hand, smiling, and had someone carry the 4th doctor down for rest. Then, he shook hands with Lin. Since number 4 needs rest, I'll be the one to give you a score. Undoubtedly, your performance can only be rated 10 out of 10. Congratulations. Peacekeeper. Thank you. Lin extended his hand. Soon, half an hour of surgery passed in the blink of an eye. Time was extremely tight. No rest was given to them. Now, enter the assessment for the 2nd item. The chief examiner paced back and forth with a hoarse voice, looking at the remaining 8 members. Outstanding adaptability is undoubtedly essential for you in the medical field, but at the same time, a strong mental resilience is crucial to become a qualified night doctor. When you were treating your patients just now, I noticed that many students didn't administer anesthesia to their patients. So, you should also know how to write the word pain, right? Yes, he shouted loudly, his voice suddenly rising. Having endured suffering oneself, one is compassionate to others. Similarly, if you cannot bear pain yourselves, do not expect your patients to endure it. Pain is the remedy for awakening. And as qualified night doctors, you must also have the highest pain resistance. This is what we are going to test next. We will examine your tolerance to pain. As soon as these words were spoken, except for the mechanical puppet of number 1, Lin of number 4, and the undead number 2 and number 9, the other 4 students all trembled. Obviously, pain is a product unique to flesh and blood creatures. The large door behind him opened, and 8 mechanical creations were pushed out, each with a seat in the middle. Above the seat hung an inverted helmet, faintly flashing with electricity. The chief examiner sneered. This is the best device crafted by our city's top mechanical master specifically for this stage of the test. As you mentioned earlier, due to differences in race and body structure, the pain tolerance of each person varies. But I didn't say we would inflict pain on your bodies. This machine can simulate the sensation of pain directly in your consciousness. As long as you are a creature with thinking ability and self-awareness, it can simulate it 100%. The crowd was shocked. This was an absolutely brutal machine. The being that invented such a thing must die. No more nonsense. The chief examiner's gaze sharpened, sneering, choose a machine and sit on it. We will categorize the intensity of pain into 200 levels. Only if your pain tolerance reaches 50 will you pass. In the end, we will rank you based on your performance. The higher the rank, the higher the score you'll get. It depends on yourselves. Next to Lin, the vampire number 3 turned uneasily and said, "Hey, good doctor, you must be human, right? The pain tolerance of you humans should be the lowest. Aren't you afraid at all?" Lin sighed and shook his head, furrowing his brow. "Afraid? Of course I'm afraid. I've been afraid of pain since I was little." The vampire finally breathed a sigh of relief, secretly glancing at him, feeling a bit reassured. After all, he was human. Although his skills seemed excellent in terms of psychological resilience, he was definitely inferior to the monsters of the dark world. The worst pain tolerance should be him and the other 2 dark elves. With this in mind, even if his performance was poor with the 3 of them as a baseline, he could feel more at ease. Then, machine activation. 3, 2, 1, start. With the chief examiner's loud shout, their machines started rumbling, and they could clearly feel the vibrations produced by the machines. And in the next moment, a large number appeared above their heads. 1. This represented the most basic pain perception. At this stage, the pain was something that almost any creature could endure. As time passed, this number would gradually increase, providing the students with an adaptive process, similar to boiling a frog in warm water. The chief examiner sneered at them, saying, "Of course, if you're not afraid, you can adjust the pain level yourself. Only upward, not downward. See the button in front of your left hand. As long as you press it once, the pain level will increase by 1. Those who are not afraid of death can directly raise the pain to level 60, and you'll pass immediately." Just as he finished speaking, ding, 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 the 2 undead and the mechanical puppet instantly pressed the button in front of them. The 2 stitched monsters were not to be outdone and continued to raise the pain level. "Too much," complained the vampire. Soon, the 2 undead fixed the pain level at around 30, their soul flames flickering wildly. Apparently, the sudden pain made them struggle a bit. The mechanical puppet was stronger. It steadily pressed the button. It didn't stop until it reached around 44, then quickly began cooling its core. The 2 stitched monsters closely followed at around level 30. Seeing these few creatures quickly distancing themselves, the 2 dark elves couldn't stand it. They also started pressing the buttons. The level of pain kept rising. The vampire's eyes flickered. Glancing at Lin, he saw him with closed eyes, relaxing completely, showing no intention of pressing the button. Did he give up? Indeed. For humans, pain tolerance is an inherent disadvantage compared to other monsters. He really didn't need to struggle like the others, but he had to be in the top 4. So, she gritted her teeth and pressed the button again. The chief examiner stood at a distance, squinting at the students, then shifted his gaze to Lin, who had his eyes closed. Was he going to give up on this test? Indeed, because compared to other monsters, humans had the worst pain tolerance. Even after artificial cultivation, it was challenging to surpass those naturally born monsters. But he still felt it was a pity. With the surgical skills displayed by number 3, he really didn't want to see him eliminated like this. But rules are rules. I can only wish him good luck. He looked at Lin with a heavy gaze. On the machine of number 4, Lin sat there with his eyes closed. What no one noticed was that one of his fingers lightly tapped the armrest, showing a very comfortable expression. "Hey, left's voice sounded in his mind. Aren't you thinking of giving up? Only 18 levels of pain now. This is not your limit. You used to cut yourself without even blinking." Lin closed his eyes, enjoying. "No, I just think the pain at this level is very helpful for relaxing the mood. And I can't even find the source of pain. It's quite enjoyable." Lin closed his eyes, saying, "It's fine, no need to be so worked up. Why rush to push it to the top? Anyway, there are still 10 minutes left." Left was amazed. "You don't seem to be in much pain." Lin lifted his head with a dejected expression, closing his eyes. "Well, I used blood flesh catastrophe to tweak my brain a bit. I added some pleasure to the pain." Left was astonished and asked, "Pleasure?" Lin closed his eyes, immediately recalling the ambiguous little game he played with the blood-dressed lady. Left exclaimed, "Are you thinking of some strange scenes in your mind? Your heart seems to be beating intensely." Lin shook his head. "No, I'm adapting to this change. When the last 5 minutes arrive, we can make a final push." Soon, the time reached the last 5 minutes. The pain tolerance of puppet number 1 had soared to 70, and the 2 undead also reached over 60. Obviously, the rankings were fixed, and they didn't bother to push further. Lin took a deep breath and closed his eyes. And when he opened his eyes again, he was ready for the final strong push and deep penetration. Meanwhile, not far away, the chief examiner glanced at his watch, looked at the remaining less than 5 minutes, and then turned to look at Lin's still less than 30 tolerance. He shook his head and sighed. He felt regret for this young man he had high hopes for. But there was no way, because becoming a night doctor required more than just adaptability and good skills. In the last less than 5 minutes, it was absolutely impossible for this young man to reach the passing line. After all, the pain in the subsequent stages was more intense. If he rushed up without buffering, the tremendous pain would be absolutely unbearable. The young man quickly pressed the button 3 times, and the pain level displayed on his head suddenly soared to 31. Apparently, his actions also attracted the attention of other students around him. Their eyes were immediately drawn to the sound of the button being pressed. The other 5 students' gazes fell on Lin, who had closed his eyes. Could it be? Is he trying to make a final push? Puppet number 1 and the 2 undead just glanced and ignored it, because the result was already fixed. The 3 of them would achieve the top 3 results and get high scores for this exam, because no matter how hard the human worked, it was unrealistic to surpass them in the last less than 5 minutes. But even so, the pain level on Lin's head continued to rise steadily. In almost an instant, it froze at the critical level of 100. The mechanical puppet and the 2 undead behind him became anxious. They firmly bit onto Lin's tail, quickly raising the pain level to 91, 87, and 86. However, the malignant reactions caused by the intense pain were already evident. Smoke billowed from the head of puppet number 1, and tiny sparks burst forth. The flames in the eye sockets of the 2 undead, like candles in a storm, swayed violently. "Quick, go check on his condition," the chief examiner shouted with a grave expression. "See if he has fainted, see if his actions are unconscious. If so, get him out urgently." Yes, 2 night doctors immediately rushed to his side. But as soon as they approached, they felt something unusual. A rolling heat wave emanated from the young man in front of them, and wisps of white vapor rose from his body, as if he had just experienced a 100°C sauna. His skin had turned uniformly red, and he lowered his head. Although his expression couldn't be seen, his harsh panting could be heard. Clearly, he was still conscious. "Hey, number 4, can you still hear me?" One night doctor immediately rushed to him, reached out to touch his forehead, but her hand immediately recoiled as if touching an electric shock. Her gaze became urgent, because it was scalding, like touching a boiling furnace, and for some reason, his whole body seemed to exude a strong male hormone scent, as if he had just undergone an unimaginable intense workout. Her gaze subconsciously looked down. In an instant, her gaze became vacant. As if seeing something incredibly powerful beyond cognition, she widened her eyes, covered her mouth, and her face turned unimaginably red at an alarming speed. Instinctively, she clamped her legs together. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Although through the fabric, she seemed to feel waves of heat coming at her, experiencing the strong and offensive impact. Is he really just a young human boy? She covered her mouth, and her trembling pupils reflected a word on the left and right, like a stereogram. "Hey, why are you standing there stupidly? What's his situation?" Another night doctor urgently checked the conditions of the other students, then saw the female night doctor standing dazedly in front of number 4. He immediately ran over in haste. His gaze then looked at Lin. Buzz, his gaze instantly became vacant too. Ding, target's inferiority complex plus 20. Oh my god, what did I see? Player 4. Player 4 is actually getting excited. He looks so high. It seems that this kind of pain is giving him a stronger stimulus. He is getting more and more excited. The eyes of all the female night physicians around widened in amazement. Accelerate. Keep accelerating. Because I'm already too excited. Hurry up. Player 2 fainted. Player 2 withdrew from the competition. The first place has been decided. It's player 4. Wait. Player 4 still hasn't stopped. He's still accelerating. He's on top. He seems unable to stop being high. He is still rising. Left shouted, "Brain, can you stop now? I also feel strange. It seems that the weird feeling from your brain has spread to my consciousness." Lin, out of control, laughed wildly, grabbed his head, and said, "Hold on. We've come this far. If we don't break the record incidentally, it's a bit of a shame." Left yelled, "But it's so weird. I also have a strong feeling. I can't take it." Finally, when the pain tolerance level reached the limit at 200, the entire machine exploded in an instant. Boom. With a loud noise, the 4th machine burst open. There it is, the first student in history who blew up the machine in the pain tolerance test. With a roar. At this moment, Left finally hung down his tongue, and his arm finally flipped over. Lin walked out step by step from the sparks of the explosion, his figure tall, with a pain tolerance of 200. He had already broken the highest record during their night physician trainee period. This is simply the limit that only a pervert among perverts can achieve. The last assessment tested your pain tolerance, and this time, we'll be evaluating your psychological resilience. Psychological resilience. A stitched-up monster puzzled. The chief examiner's expression gradually became sinister and mysterious, laughing coldly. Yes, because this is the dark world. As traveling physicians, you will inevitably encounter various terrifying events. Your ability to maintain a calm mind amidst endless terror is crucial. Do you see those 6 doors? Each door is a copy, and you will experience various fears and temptations in each of them. There are 5 levels in total. As long as you can perfectly pass these 5 levels, you will complete this assessment. Then he smiled mysteriously. Remember, this is not an illusion. If you lose the key, you will be forever trapped there, living worse than death. Number 2. The undead said hoarsely, the undead don't fear. The chief examiner smiled. No, not just fear, but also your weaknesses. Now, who wants to go first? Everyone looked at each other, and then all eyes fell on Lin. Lin was surprised. Me. Everyone nodded unanimously. You are the most formidable among us, of course, it's you, Lin. But Lin didn't mind. He stood up, smiled, and said, Instructor, then I'll go first. I believe I can pass this test. Under the gaze of everyone, he strode to the door, took out the key from his hand, and opened the door with a click. Creak. The door slowly opened. Just as he was about to enter, the mysterious voice of the chief examiner came from behind. Kid, don't let your guard down. Many students have died there unable to withstand temptation and fear. Lin nodded. Then he pushed open the door and entered. The first thing that came into view was darkness. Lin did not dare to relax his vigilance. Fear, temptation, weaknesses. It seems I don't have any, right? Lin squinted, saw the light ahead, and walked briskly toward it. The door closed behind him. In the next moment, her seductive eyes gazing at him. She was a woman perfect in every aspect, awakening primal desires in any man, whether through her gaze or her figure. Lin finally understood the meaning of this level, temptation. For a normal male, this was an extremely challenging level, as it played on biological instincts and impulses. Lin remained composed, maintaining inner calm, realizing that all of this was an illusion. Even if a stunning woman sat in his lap, what difference did it make? As Buddha said, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. After this test, everything would be revealed as illusions, nothing would be left behind. More importantly, Lin focused his mind, closed his eyes, and ignored the enchanting woman in his lap. Don't you want to take a look, little brother? This isn't a test for you, it's a reward. You probably haven't tasted the flavor of a mature woman yet. Enchanting words echoed in Lin's ears as the woman coiled around him, continuously stimulating his mind. Lin abruptly opened his eyes and saw the pink fog surrounding him. It was an aphrodisiac mist. Now, Lin finally understood the sinister nature of this test. Mental resilience dropped rapidly. Succubi, truly fitting their name. These creatures were nightmares for almost all male beings, possessing an inherent charm that could directly influence one's mind with just a glance, a word, or a gesture. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.